The wind in West Texas did not just blow. It hit like a warning. Dust rolled across the auction yard in little spirals as Trent Baker sat on the rough bleachers with a wallet that felt too light to even open. He counted the bills anyway, like the numbers might change if he stared long enough. $43. That was all he had left, and the bank had already made it clear they were done waiting. 60 days. 3 missed payments. One ranch that had been in his family for 4 generations, hanging by a thread. Trent was 42. But he looked older. Life on the ranch outside Abilene had carved deep lines into his face, and the last 18 months had carved deeper ones. Cattle prices had dropped hard, while feed costs climbed so high it felt like someone was laughing at him. He sold most of his herd at a loss, watching years of careful breeding leave in trailers headed for slaughter. He told himself it was just business, but it felt like burying a piece of his family every time another truck pulled away. His wife, Amanda, had left 6 months earlier. She took their daughter to Fort Worth to stay with her sister. Amanda had stopped believing in the ranch long before she stopped believing in their marriage. Trent did not blame her, not fully. The ranch asked for everything and gave nothing back for a long time. Still, the house felt like a ghost of the life he used to have, full of quiet rooms and memories that hurt. So Trent came to the livestock auction every Wednesday, not to buy, just to watch. It was a habit that made no sense, like picking at a wound that would not heal. He watched men with money bid on healthy cattle and strong horses. He watched smiles and handshakes and easy talk. Each sale felt like proof that the world had moved on without him. Then the auctioneer called out a number that made the whole place shift in its seat. Lot 73, the man said, and even his voice sounded tired. Quarter-horse filly, about 4 months old. Dam deceased. Owner surrendering. Selling as is. A handler led the foal into the ring, and people reacted like someone had dragged in a broken piece of trash. The filly was tiny, barely reaching the handler's waist. Her coat was a muddy mess, crusted with dried manure and missing patches where mange had bitten deep. She was so thin every rib showed, and her hip bones stuck out sharp like hooks. One eye was swollen and crusted shut. She limped on her right front leg, each step heavy and unsure. A few folks laughed. Others shook their heads and looked away. The handler stared at the ground like he wanted to disappear. "Let's start at $20, the auctioneer said. Silence. $10. Anybody? Nothing. 5? People were already checking their phones, waiting for the next lot like this one did not matter. The auctioneer's voice flattened. "Folks, I gotta sell this filly. $1? Still nothing. The foal swayed slightly, like the ring itself was moving under her. Trent felt a hard twist in his chest, the kind that came when he saw something too familiar, not just an animal in trouble, but something tossed aside because it was weak. "All right," the auctioneer said, almost like he was done fighting. 50 cents. 50 cents, or she goes straight to the killers. Do I hear 50 cents? Quote. Trent stared at the filly again, and something in him sharpened. Even sick, even starving, she was not begging. She held her head up, not high, but steady. She did not cower from the noise. And then her one good eye found Trent's place on the bleachers. It was just a look, but it hit him like a hand on his shoulder. Before he could talk himself out of it, his arm lifted. 50 cents to the gentleman in the back, the auctioneer said fast, relieved. Sold. As Trent walked down, he felt eyes on him like heat. Some people looked amused. Some looked annoyed, like he was wasting time. He did not have money for a vet. He barely had enough feed for his last 2 horses. Buying a half-dead foal was the dumbest choice he could make. But when he took the lead rope from the handler, the foal leaned into it, like she had been waiting for someone to hold on. Trent guided her toward his battered pickup and small trailer. She limped, shaky and slow. Getting her inside was hard, and he had to steady her more than once. He drove home at 15 miles an hour, watching the road like every bump might be the one that ended her. At the ranch, his 2 remaining horses watched from the fence. Buck, an old gelding with tired eyes, and Rosie, a mare too old for breeding, stood quiet as Trent settled the foal in the small barn. He used the last of his good hay to make a bed. He poured water into a shallow pan because she seemed too weak to lift her head high. That night, Trent did not sleep in the house. He spread a blanket in the barn and sat close enough to hear her breathing. He told himself he was staying to watch her condition, but the truth was simpler. The ranch house felt empty. In the barn, with the soft sounds of horses in the dark, he did not feel quite so alone. The foal made it through the night. Then another. Then a week. Trent worked with what he had, the way his grandfather taught him. Warm salt water for the infected eye, an old cowboy mix of sulfur and lard for the mange. Small feedings, many times a day, because a starved body could not handle much at once. Gentle walks in the paddock to build strength in her injured leg. He named her Tiny partly because she was small, and partly because it felt like a promise that she would not stay broken. Months passed, and Tiny changed in ways that made Trent stop and stare. By late fall, her coat shed into a beautiful blue roan, with a white blaze down her face and 3 white socks. She was still not big, but she was built right, deep in the chest and strong in the hindquarters, like she came from better blood than anyone guessed. Even more surprising was her spirit. Most horses that survived neglect turned fearful or mean. Tiny turned curious. She followed Trent like a shadow. She looked at the world like she belonged in it. Then came the morning Trent opened the gate to move his last 2 cows, the mean old crossbreeds that had broken fences like it was a game. As usual, they scattered in opposite directions, refusing to be handled easy. Trent cursed under his breath and ran after one, already tired before the work even started. That was when he noticed Tiny standing still, watching the cows with a focus that did not match her age. And without a sound, without a signal, without any training, the little horse began to move. Tiny moved like she had been born for that moment. She lowered her head and stepped toward the first cow with calm purpose. Not rushing, not scared. The cow swung left, ready to bolt past Trent, but Tiny slid into the path like a door closing. The cow tried right, and Tiny matched her again, light on her feet, even with that leg that used to limp. Trent stopped running and just watched, his mouth slightly open, as the young horse guided the cow back where Trent needed her, then turned and went after the second cow without being asked. It was not luck. It was not play. Tiny read those cows like she could hear their thoughts. She watched their shoulders, their hips, the little shifts that came before a break. She stayed just far enough to pressure them, never close enough to get kicked, never far enough to lose control. In less than a minute, both cows were back where they belonged, and Tiny stood still again, ears forward, waiting like she was ready for the next job. Trent felt something warm rise in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. Hope scared him more than bad news, because hope made a man imagine a future again. He walked over to Tiny slowly, like he might spook the moment itself. Tiny turned her head and looked at him with that clear, steady eye, and she bumped his arm with her nose like she was proud of what she had done. Over the next few weeks, Trent tested her without meaning to. Any time the cows got stubborn, he brought Tiny near. He did not pull her with ropes or chase her into action. He just opened the gate and let her be there. Every time, Tiny stepped in like it was her choice, and every time, she did the work clean. She was still young, still growing, but the way she moved was sharp and sure, like a knife sliding through cloth. Trent had seen trained cutting horses before, expensive ones with famous names and famous riders. Tiny had no schooling at all, and yet she worked like she belonged in an arena with lights and crowds. One afternoon, Trent's neighbor, Clayton Briggs, drove up in his truck and leaned on the fence with a cold drink in his hand. Clayton ran a bigger ranch and had money Trent could not imagine. He also had a few trained cutting horses, the kind people talked about at feed stores like they were legends. Clayton watched Tiny work the cows, quiet for a long time, his eyes narrowing. "That's the strangest thing I ever seen," Clayton said finally. "How long you been training her?" Trent shook his head, still stunned every time he watched it happen. "I haven't, not like that. She just does it." Clayton stared at Tiny as if he was trying to solve a riddle. "Where'd you get her?" "Auction," Trent said. 50 cents. Clayton let out a short laugh like he did not believe it, then the laugh faded when he saw Trent's face. "You know anything about her bloodline? Papers? Anything?" "Nothing," Trent said. "They were gonna send her to the killers." Clayton took another long look at Tiny. "Well, she's got cutting horse in her somewhere. That kind of instinct don't just show up out of nowhere." Trent rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to say. He felt proud, but pride did not pay a mortgage. He still had a bank deadline hanging over him like a storm cloud. Clayton's voice dropped a little, like he was careful not to scare the idea away. "You ever thought about competing with her?" The words sounded crazy in Trent's ears. Competing cost money. Entry fees, fuel, food, tack, time. It was a world for people who could afford to lose. Trent could not even afford to lose a week. "I can't," Trent said. "I'm just trying to keep the ranch." Clayton nodded like he expected that answer. Then he said, "Let me help." Trent frowned. "Why would you do that?" Clayton took a slow breath. "Because I've been around this a long time and I ain't seen a horse move like that without training. Not in years. Maybe not ever. You got something special, Trent, and if you're too broke to test it, you might lose the only chance you got." Trent wanted to say no. Pride tried to stand up in him, the stubborn kind that kept men poor. But another part of him, the part that slept in the barn beside a dying foal, knew he had already taken one impossible chance. Maybe this was just the next step. Clayton told him about a small regional cutting horse show in Leech, a little town with an arena that mostly hosted ranchers and local trainers. "3 months from now," Clayton said. "Entry fee ain't much, but I'll cover it. Just show up. If she falls apart, you go home. If she does what I think she'll do, you'll know." Trent agreed, mostly because he truly had nothing left to lose. Those 3 months were not like normal training. Trent did not force Tiny into tight patterns or long drills. He did not have fancy equipment or a trainer standing over him. He worked with what he had, and he listened to Tiny more than he spoke. He built her strength with slow rides and steady work. He kept her healthy with careful feed, clean water, and time in the pasture. When he did bring cows near, he watched how she wanted to move and tried not to get in her way. Tiny learned fast, not because she was being taught, but because she was waking up into what she was meant to be. She started anticipating Trent's body shifts in the saddle, a small lean, a breath, a look, and she was already there. It felt less like riding a horse and more like riding a thought. Still, the closer the competition got, the more Trent's fear returned. Some nights he sat on the porch with the bank papers in his hands, staring at the numbers until his eyes burned. Prize money could help, but what if Tiny got hurt? What if she failed and proved this was all just a desperate dream? What if the bank took the ranch anyway? 2 weeks before Leech, Trent got a call from Amanda. He stared at the phone when her name came up, surprised it still felt like a wound. He answered, and her voice sounded careful. "I heard from my sister's husband," Amanda said. "He saw something online, a picture of you and a horse. Is that true? Are you entering a show?" Trent swallowed. "Yeah, it's true." There was a pause. "Trent," she said softly, "I don't want you getting hurt. I don't mean physically, I mean inside. You always put everything into the ranch until it broke you." He looked out at the dark pasture where Tiny stood under the moon, a small shape that had somehow become the center of his life. "I know," he said, "but this feels different." Amanda did not argue. She did not promise anything either. She just said, "Tell me how it goes." Then she hung up, leaving Trent with a strange mix of pain and something like comfort. Even if she was gone, she was still watching. The day of the competition, Trent drove into Leech with his trailer rattling behind his truck. The arena was bigger than he expected, with bright signs and clean fences and rows of people in hats that looked expensive. He parked beside glossy rigs and shiny trailers that could have bought his whole ranch twice over. He felt small the moment he stepped out, like his boots did not belong on that gravel. Tiny stepped out of the trailer calm as ever, her blue roan coat catching the sunlight. She looked good, not fancy, not groomed like a show queen, but strong and healthy and sharp-eyed. Still, She was smaller than some of the other horses, and her tack was worn, and Trent's saddle had been repaired so many times it carried more stitches than leather. People stared, not because Tiny looked bad, but because there was something about her that pulled attention. A few whispered as she walked by. A man asked, "What's her breeding?" And Trent just shook his head because he did not even know what to say. When Trent signed in, he saw his name on the list and almost laughed. It looked wrong there, like someone had made a mistake. Clayton showed up with a grin and slapped Trent on the shoulder. "You ready?" "No," Trent admitted. "Not even close." Clayton laughed. "Good, means you care." As the day went on, Trent watched other riders compete. He saw horses cutting clean, riders sitting steady, judges writing notes. He saw mistakes too. A cow slipping past a horse, a rider overcorrecting, a horse losing focus. Trent tried to memorize the rhythm of it all, but his stomach stayed tight. When they called his number, Trent mounted Tiny and rode into the arena. The air inside felt different, heavy with eyes and dust and quiet. The herd of cattle stood packed together near the center, shifting and flicking tails. A gate swung shut behind them, and time started. Trent took a breath and guided Tiny toward the herd. Tiny changed in an instant. Her ears locked forward. Her body lowered slightly, like a bow pulled back before a shot. She did not rush. She slid into position and watched the herd until a single cow stepped out. Then, Tiny moved with speed that made Trent's heart jump. The cow tried to dart back, and Tiny snapped into place with a fast turn, low and smooth. The cow tried again, and Tiny blocked again, sharper this time. She held the cow away from the herd with a calm pressure, never panicking, never wasting a step. Trent barely had to do anything. He just stayed balanced and tried not to get thrown by her sudden stops and quick turns. The crowd's noise faded. Trent could not hear anything but Tiny's breathing and the thud of hooves in the dirt. The cow made a hard break, and Tiny matched it so fast it looked like the cow had hit an invisible wall. Judges leaned forward. A few people in the stands stood up without realizing it. Tiny's turns were so quick and deep that Trent's hat almost flew off. His hands tightened on the reins, but Tiny did not need him pulling. She needed him trusting. So Trent loosened his grip and let her work. When the time ended, a bell rang. For a second there was silence, like the whole arena was holding its breath. Then applause burst out, loud and sudden. It hit Trent like a wave. He rode Tiny out, shaking, not sure if the applause meant anything real or if it was just people being kind. Clayton met him at the gate, eyes wide. "You see that?" Clayton said, almost laughing. "You see what your horse just did?" Trent slid off the saddle, legs trembling. "I don't even know what to think." When the scores came up, Trent stared at the board like it was written in another language. Tiny was not just good. She was the best score of the day by a wide margin. Tiny won the whole competition. Trent held the trophy with both hands like it might vanish if he blinked. Someone pressed a check into his palm, $5,000 in prize money. He had not held that much cash in 2 years. He felt dizzy, like the ground under him had changed. Then the questions started. Trainers and breeders crowded around him, talking fast, asking about bloodlines, papers, who trained her, where she came from. Trent kept saying the same thing, feeling foolish every time. "I got her at auction," he said. "She didn't have papers. She was half dead." A man in a clean hat and polished boots leaned in close and said, "I'll give you $50,000 for her right now." Trent's breath caught. $50,000 was more money than he had seen at one time in his whole life. Before he could answer, another voice said, "75." A woman with a sharp gaze stepped forward and spoke like she was giving advice and a warning at the same time. "Listen to me. I don't know where you found her, but that horse has the best natural cutting instinct I have seen in 30 years. Whatever you do, do not sell her cheap." Trent looked at Tiny standing quietly beside him, her ears flicking as if she understood every word. He thought of the auction. The laughter. The 50 cents. The way she had looked straight at him like she was asking for one chance. Trent swallowed hard. "She's not for sale," he said. and his voice surprised him with how steady it sounded. As the crowd slowly drifted away, Clayton came up beside him, still smiling, but his eyes serious now. "This is just the start," Clayton said. "Now folks are going to come at you from every angle. They'll offer you money you never dreamed of. They'll also try to take advantage of you because you look like a man who needs it." Trent stared at the check in his hand, then out toward the arena where Tiny had just made history without even knowing it. 60 days. The bank, the ranch, Amanda and their daughter in Fort Worth. It all felt closer now, like it might be within reach. But then Trent noticed a man standing back near the fence, watching Tiny with a cold, careful look. The man did not clap. He did not smile. He just stared like he was studying a prize he believed should already belong to him. And as Trent led Tiny toward the trailer, he felt something he had not felt all day. Not joy, not relief, a warning. Trent tried to shake off the feeling as he loaded Tiny into the trailer, but the man's stare stayed in his mind the whole drive back to the ranch. The check on the seat beside him felt heavy, like it carried both hope and danger. $5,000 could buy feed, patch fences, and maybe calm the bank for a moment. But it also announced something to the world. Trent Baker had a horse people wanted, and wanting could turn mean real fast. When he pulled into his yard, the ranch looked the same as it always had: sunburned boards, tired fence posts, and the long flat land stretching out under a wide sky. But Trent did not feel the same inside it anymore. For the first time in years, the ranch did not feel like a place he was losing. It felt like a place he might fight for. The next morning, Trent drove straight into town and walked into the bank with his hat in his hand. The same woman at the desk looked at him like she expected him to beg. Trent did not beg. He set the check down, signed it, and asked for a meeting. When the manager came out, Trent explained he could pay 1 month right then and would have the rest soon. The manager's eyebrows lifted. "You got prize money from a horse show?" "Yes," Trent said, keeping his voice calm. "And I have more shows lined up." The manager did not look convinced, but money was money. They agreed to extend the deadline a little, not out of kindness, but because Trent had proven he was still breathing. When Trent got home, his phone rang before he even got out of the truck. Then it rang again. And again. Word had moved fast. People wanted to buy Tiny. People wanted to breed Tiny. People wanted to know the secret. Trent ignored most of it. He was not ready, and he could feel the pressure building like a storm line across the horizon. Clayton drove over that evening, bringing a folder of papers and a serious face. "We need to protect you," Clayton said. "You can't just be a rancher with a good horse now. You're a target." Trent sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Amanda used to place dinner plates, the same table where his daughter used to do homework. He listened as Clayton talked about contracts, ownership, and keeping records. It sounded like a foreign language to Trent, but he forced himself to learn. For Tiny's sake. For the ranch's sake. Over the next months they entered more competitions. Tiny won again. And again. It was not always easy. Some arenas were louder. Some cattle were meaner. And some riders tried to rattle Trent by crowding him or cutting too close. But Tiny never lost her focus. She stayed locked on the job, like it was the only thing in the world. Trent's name started appearing on posters. Local papers ran small stories at first. Then, bigger ones. A man who was almost broke riding a horse he bought for 50 cents, beating people who spent more on a saddle than he spent on his whole truck. Each win brought more prize money. 10,000, 15, 20. But each win also brought more strangers. One afternoon at a bigger event near Amarillo, the same cold-eyed man Trent had noticed at Leach approached him near the warm-up pens. He introduced himself as Wade Hollister. His handshake was firm, but his eyes did not soften. "That's a fine horse," Wade said. "I'm surprised you're still holding on to her." Trent kept his voice polite. "She's not for sale." Wade smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. Everything's for sale. Just depends how bad someone needs the money. Trent felt his jaw tighten. I'm done talking. Wade leaned closer, lowering his voice. You're stepping into a world you don't understand. Horses like that don't stay with men like you. Either you sell her or someone will take her. Trent's blood went cold. He wanted to swing at Wade, but he forced himself to step back. Violence would not solve this. It would only prove Wade right about him. That night, Trent barely slept. He checked the barn twice. He made sure the locks were secure. He felt foolish doing it, but fear is not logical. Fear is a survival instinct, and Trent had learned to respect instincts. 2 days later, fear proved it had been right. Trent came out at dawn to feed and found the barn door cracked open. His heart slammed hard. He rushed inside, calling Tiny's name. The stall was empty. For a moment, Trent could not breathe. His hands shook so badly he could barely grab the latch. He ran outside, scanning the pasture, the yard, the road. Nothing. No hoofprints where she should have been. No sound. Just wind and silence. Then he saw it. A cut lock on the gate. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt leading toward the county road. Tiny had been stolen. Trent's legs nearly gave out, but anger caught him and held him upright. He called Clayton first. Then he called the sheriff. Then he called every neighbor within 10 miles. The words came out rough, like they scraped his throat. She's gone, he told them. They took her. Quote, Clayton arrived within minutes, face pale. The sheriff came too, but Trent could see the look in the man's eyes. Horses got stolen sometimes. They rarely got returned. Especially not ones worth serious money. But Tiny was not just a horse to Trent. She was his second chance. She was the thing that had kept him from falling all the way into the dark. Losing her felt worse than losing money. It felt like losing the one thing that had trusted him when he did not even trust himself. Trent did not sit and wait. He climbed into his truck and drove the back roads like a man possessed. He checked cattle guards, looked for fresh tracks, stopped at crossroads, and listened. The sheriff told him to go home and let law enforcement handle it. Trent nodded, then kept driving. He had lived on this land his whole life. He knew where trailers could hide, where people could slip through without being seen. Near sunset, Clayton called him. Trent, my buddy over in Sweetwater heard something, Clayton said. A horse matching Tiny's look was seen loaded at a small private stable outside town. The place belongs to Wade Hollister's cousin. Trent's hands clenched the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. I'm going there. Don't go alone, Clayton said fast. Wait for the sheriff. But Trent did not wait, not fully. He drove toward Sweetwater, hard hammering, and when he saw sheriff lights ahead, he pulled in behind them. Clayton had been right. The sheriff had called for backup, and now there were 2 units rolling toward the private stable. They arrived to find a tall metal gate closed, a security camera mounted above it. The sheriff spoke into a radio and then knocked on the gate with his flashlight. A man came out, acting annoyed, pretending he had no idea what was happening. They searched the property. Trent stood by, barely holding it together. Then he heard it. A soft, familiar sound from inside one of the barns. Not a whinny, not loud, just a quiet nicker. Trent's chest tightened. He pushed past the sheriff, and when the barn doors opened, there she was. Tiny stood in a stall in the back, haltered and freshly brushed, like someone had tried to make her look ready for sale. Her ears snapped forward when she saw Trent, and she stepped toward him, pressing her forehead against his chest the way she always did. Trent's eyes burned. He held her face with both hands like he needed to feel she was real. The sheriff's voice turned hard. This horse belongs to Trent Baker. You have paperwork. The man stammered, tried to claim confusion, tried to say someone must have brought the horse without his knowledge. The sheriff was not buying it. Trent could see enough to know the truth. Wade's warning had not been empty. It had been a promise. Wade Hollister was arrested 2 days later when the investigation connected him to the theft. It was not just Tiny. The sheriff found evidence of other stolen horses moved through the same network. Wade had money and lawyers, but the story had already escaped into the open. People in the cutting horse world were furious. They might compete hard, but they did not tolerate theft, especially not from a man who had done everything the right way. Tiny returned to the ranch, but Trent did not go back to living the same. He added cameras, better locks. He built stronger fencing. He also started taking the business side seriously, the way Clayton kept telling him to. He formed a small company around Tiny, with proper contracts and legal protection. The more Tiny won, the more her value climbed, and Trent had to think like a man with something worth defending. Tiny kept winning. State events turned into national events. The crowds grew. The prize checks grew. And one night, after a major win in Fort Worth, Trent stood outside the arena when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Daddy." He turned, and there was his daughter, holding Amanda's hand. Amanda looked nervous, like she was not sure she belonged there. Trent walked toward them slowly, as if he was afraid the moment might break. Their daughter hugged him hard, and Trent held her like he had been starving for that feeling. Amanda's eyes were wet, but she did not look away. "I saw you on the news," Amanda said. "I saw the horse. I saw what you did." Trent swallowed. "I didn't do it alone." Amanda gave a small nod toward the trailers, where Tiny stood calm as always, like she was waiting for them. "Maybe not," she said, "but you didn't quit. And I didn't realize how much that mattered until now." That night did not fix everything. Life did not work that way, but it opened a door. Over the next year, Trent's life changed fast. Tiny earned over $200,000 in prize money. Then, breeding offers started coming in, and the numbers made Trent's head spin. 100,000 per foal. 200,000. More. People wanted her bloodline, her instinct, the rare gift that seemed impossible. Trent stayed careful. He worked with vets. He listened to experts. He protected Tiny like she was the most important partner he had ever had. Because she was. The biggest shock came when a vet suggested genetic testing during a routine breeding exam. Trent agreed, not expecting much. But when the results came back, the vet called him personally. "Trent," the vet said, voice serious, "this horse is something special." Her line traces back through a branch most folks thought was gone. The name hit the cutting horse world like thunder. Doc Barr. A legendary bloodline people spoke about like it was history, not something walking in a stall on a struggling ranch. News spread fast. Tiny's value soared overnight. Syndicates called. Breeders offered numbers Trent had never seen outside of movies. One group offered $5 million for half ownership, and Trent accepted only after he made sure he would keep control of Tiny's care and decisions. Within 5 years of that dusty auction, Trent Baker was worth over $40 million. The bank was gone from his life. The ranch mortgage was paid off. The land expanded. New barns rose where broken fences used to be. A training center opened, bringing riders from across the country. People paid huge monthly fees to learn what they called the Baker method, a way of working with horses that respected instinct instead of crushing it. Trent still told them the truth. "I didn't make her," he would say. "I just listened." Amanda came back, slowly at first, then fully. They talked through the hurt, through the years of stress and silence. Their daughter spent weekends at the ranch, laughing again in the same yard that once felt like a graveyard of memories. Amanda helped run the business side, turning chaos into order with the steady skill Trent never had. One evening, years after the auction, Trent stood in Tiny's stall at the training center. Tiny was no longer the half-dead foal people laughed at. She was a champion, a legend, and still, when Trent walked in, she pressed her forehead against his chest like she remembered everything. Amanda stepped into the doorway, smiling softly. "You know what's wild?" Trent said. "If one other person had bid 50 cents, none of this would have happened." Amanda moved closer, resting her hand on his back. "No one else saw what you saw." Trent shook his head. "I didn't see it. I just felt like she was meant to be here." Tiny breathed warm against his shirt, steady and calm. Trent looked at her, the horse that had saved his ranch, pulled his family back, and reminded him that broken things could become strong again. He thought of that auction ring, the silence, the laughter, the final call for 50 cents. He thought of the moment he lifted his hand, not because it made sense, but because his heart would not let him sit still. "Best 50 cents anyone ever spent," Amanda whispered. Trent smiled, eyes shining. "Best 50 cents anyone could spend," he said. "She didn't just save the ranch. She saved me." If you enjoyed this story, share it, leave a comment, and follow for more Wild West horse adventures.